Okay, so our next speaker is Mr. Bob Vassie, the Managing Director and CEO of St Barbara Limited. Bob is a mining engineer with over 30 years' experience in the minerals industry, including 18 years in a range of senior management type roles. He has experience in ops management, strategy, planning, corporate restructuring and business improvement, and I think Bob and his team should be credited for the very strong position St Barbara finds itself in today. If you could welcome Bob, thanks.
Well, hi everyone. It's good to be here for my fourth time at the Gold Forum, second time at Colorado Springs, and I've just knocked up 3 years with the company, and it's been a fantastic turnaround that's been achieved by the team that was in existence when I arrived. Forward-looking statements. I'll be talking a lot about the future, so please read this at your leisure. Just to cover the company briefly, for people that don't know the company so well, we're now centred in on two assets, one in a historic gold asset in West Australia, Gwalior mine that was started over 100 years ago, and is producing very strong results, as you can see there at the bottom. We just completed a financial year at 265,000 ounces at all-in sustaining of $785 Australian an ounce, so that's producing a lot of cash for us. And interestingly, Simberi up in Papua New Guinea, that did have a bit of a loss-making history, has really increased its production, dropped its cost, and contributed about 70 million free cash flow to the books this last year, with Gwalior doing about 230 million free cash flow. So a lot of money coming into the books, so that was all placed into paying off debt. We currently sit at a 1.5 billion, well actually today it's probably closer to 1.3 billion market cap, which is unusual given that we produced $303 million Australian in free cash flow. There's not too many companies would have that multiple to cash flow that cash flow yield. We ended up being able to pay off our debt and the bank balance rose, so we just announced at the end of the financial year a 6 cents a share dividend. I tried to make that 7 because that's what our share price was 2.5 years ago. So the total shareholder return for 3 years was 2,308%. So we had some happy shareholders, but now they're all saying, so what have you done for me lately? That's a nice turnaround. Where's the growth? So we'll be looking at our organic growth a bit during this presentation. It's good to have those results with an excellent safety result. We've been award-winning at the various mines and been able to bring our recordable injury frequency rate down below the gold mining industry average, which is particularly pleasing. To look back on the financial year, record safety, record consolidated production from the two assets that are remaining in our portfolio, and record low all-in sustaining costs, so we've had a great year. That produced some pretty impressive, as I mentioned, 303 million Australian free cash from the two operations, underlying net profit after tax of 160 million, and we paid off the remainder of our debt, which was 228 million Australian, paid off during the year. So a great return on capital employed, debt-free. At the end of June, we had 161 million in the bank. We have committed 100 million, which will be spent over the next couple of years to extend the life of Gwalior, because it's such a good producing asset, good cash producing asset, that we want to go stronger for longer. And we're looking at all our organic growth opportunities and a few inorganic opportunities, because our driver for growth is to be able to diversify our production portfolio, because we're quite reliant on what we believe is the deepest trucking mine in the world. Just to look at some of the financial metrics that sometimes miners don't dwell so much on, but our EBITDA margin's running at 50% now, but if you just look at Gwalior's, it's 64% EBITDA margin. And we were able to produce a reasonable dividend yield by paying a dividend for the first time since 1995. I think I was still in the short pants then. Okay. The big story about where all this cash flow has been going is quite a steady hit at our debt. We just piled all that cash flow into our debt. It was high, it was 8.875 coupon US bonds or notes. And we also had a facility from Red Kite. And we just piled in to get that debt out of the way early. And you can see the rate of climb now into the bank balance at the rate of about, this is US dollars, 50 million US dollars a quarter. We ended up, I'm embarrassed to say it, but we ended up with too much money and were required to give back to shareholders, which I think is a good idea, and we want to be able to sustain that. But we also want to be able to execute our organic growth, including the 100 million Australian dollar project at Gwalior. The story at Gwalior is quite interesting. You can see we had a pretty good grade uplift last year, and that reserve grade at 7.8 is all our reserve grade down in the very deep sections of the mine. But what you'll continue to see over the next 5 years is 9 to 10 grams a tonne over the next 5 years. And that'll sort of produce, we've been able to, through productivity improvements, get from 185,000 ounces a year to 265,000 ounces a year, sometimes at similar grades. With a good grade kick this year. We do have high-grade stringers in the mine that we top cut out of the model, and they always give us a pleasant surprise when you're finding you're pulling a 1 ounce a tonne stope every now and then. It's quite good to have, and of course it has a dramatic impact on your all-in sustaining costs. So great productivity improvement there. The mine has changed its mining method. It's introduced ore passes, remote bogging, keeping waste underground, a new stoping sequence, and that's really knocked the tonnage productivity out of the park. I'm going to attempt to fly through now because I know a lot of people that aren't geologists, including mining engineers like myself, are spatially challenged. So let's try and walk through what the ore body looks like since when Herbert Hoover was mining it, and also look at the project that we're doing for 100 million. So this had a sort of sound voiceover, and I'll use my own voice. That's what the old timers did. They got down to 1,000 metres, and then the open pit happened. So you can see the plunge of the ore body and the fact that it's a stacked set of loads. You'll see that a bit later. So the old timers got down to about 1,000 metres. We, as St Barbara, have been in there since 2008, and we've now the decline's down past 1640, and we're pulling our first stope at 1620 metres below surface, taking about 2 hours to drive a truck from the bottom outwards. So it's like going around a very long, dark roundabout. People are pleased when they get to the top only to realise they have to go back down again. So you can see the layers of plate loads. So we're only mining not even half of our load set, so we'll be able to retreat up the mine and pull out the other loads as well. And you can see there the plunge of the ore body and how it's thick and long section, thin on cross section. The stope panels, this isn't actually planned, this is what's been done in St Barbara's time, and like I said, we're stoping down to 1620. What we're going to do to get down further is simply keep trucking, but to do that we've got to introduce air into the mine. We've been drilling from surface. Some of those holes, the parent holes, are over $1 million. We will be drilling more from underground later, and we've been able to establish down to 2,140 metres now extra reserves. Every time we do a 200 metre vertical section, which we've just done in the last 2 years in a row, we add a 1 million ounce resource, but we only typically convert the main loads in it, so we get about a third conversion rate. We will add more of the minor loads into reserves later. To get down there, we're going to have to drop these 2 ventilation shafts. They're going to be raised bores, but we're not going to try and attempt a world record length raised bore, so we're going to do it in 2 sections and link it from underground. And that'll introduce the air and chilling we need to go deeper. And if we want to go even deeper, we just add more chilling. We won't need any more vent shafts. So that's about $80 million, the shafts, raised bore shafts, fans and chilling. And then we're going to put another $20 million into establishing paste aggregate fill underground. So at the 1420 level, we're sliping that out, and we're going to put in 2-stage crushing and screening. For waste, this is not for ore. We're going to crush the waste we generate in the mine. We do 1 million tonnes of ore and about 200,000 tonnes of waste. So we're going to crush it and mix it in with our paste, and paste fill the stopes with an aggregate paste. And that's going to keep all the waste underground as we go deeper and deeper. You don't want to be trucking waste for 2 hours to the surface. Importantly, this system, which we hope to have in by March, will deal with all the raise bore chippings that we're going to end up in the bottom of our mine when we execute these shafts. We're looking at speeding up the whole project by doing 2 raise bores at a time. Our supplier has the equipment to do that. So I hope that sort of gives you a bit of orientation of how we're tackling the depth of the ore body. A lot of people think because when we're drilling down really, really deep, we're actually getting some thinner sections. Back at 1,000 metres where the old timers were, it pinched in a bit. Now it's swollen out and we're in a real good sweet spot, but we're in that sweet spot for the next 5 years. When we get lower than that, the reserves that were recently added, we'll be mining some of the lodes on the way down and some of the lodes on the way back, which extend all the way back to the surface. And we're currently optimising that, and we hope to, within say 3 months, be able to give the market a guidance of just what we can do. Because if we can get this ventilation in 2 years, I've got 3 years in the sweet spot with all the air I need, I can go above the current 265 ounce rate and perhaps go through 300. And when you're making a 64% EBITDA margin and producing gold for $7.85 Australian, that's going to be very value accretive. So there's a bit of a picture on what we walked you through in the flyover. So the 2 vent shafts, they'll be 5 metre wide vent shafts. We've done one of those before down to 800 metres, which is that existing shaft. And like I said, to reduce risk, we'll do it in 4 sections, 2,000 metre sections and 2 500 metre sections. Pretty bulk standard crushing plant. If it was on surface, anyone could do it, but if it's underground, you've got to make sure it's maintainable. This thing's not going to work all the time. We don't have to crush waste all the time, but it's like a fire truck. You need it to start when you turn it on so that you can get your stopes filled. A bit of a cross-section of how we've been drilling into the ore body now down to 2,200. We are going to put a 2,600 metre hole in. It won't make a resource or a reserve, but it'll tell me that if the ore body's swollen out again, I might accelerate the decline or take a different way to optimise our lode extraction sequence. If you look from a plane view and look down and plan and project the ore body up to surface, it's not just all about depth. You can see going off down deep there, but we've also found more stuff to the north, and between the old timers and when we picked up, there's intermediate sections that we can pick up as well. Plus all the lodes that we've left behind is a lot more in this ore body to give. Our current mine plan goes to 2024 without the extra reserves and resources that we added last year. We're doing quite a good job in replacing depletion, but we're putting the vent shafts in to go stronger for longer. We've also done a 3D seismic program recently around the Gwalior area. We've got all the ground there. And our ore body reflects like a beacon acoustically. So we will be looking to look at these other signals that we're seeing and develop drill targets. Hopefully we've got parallel ore bodies before we get so deep that the rock starts to melt. Just quickly on Simberi. Simberi was a bit of a problem, almost took the company out backwards. That's why we had such a good return over the last 3 years. These guys have been pivotal to our success, going from 44 to 116,000 ounces in the operation, and really a great impact on the US dollar all-in sustaining costs there, making a really good contribution to us. Just with time, I'll probably not dwell too much on the resources and reserves. It's quite a healthy position. We replaced depletion in both mines, so we're sitting on 4.3 million ounces of reserves, but quite a big resource, and a lot of that resource not converting to reserves is going to be in and around Gwalior as we get these other lodes drilled out. And there you can see that just with depth extensions in Gwalior, 200 metres, actually vertical, it was a 1 million ounce resource added there, but the depth extensions only yielded 300,000 ounces because we've only been converting the major lodes. We've got about 16 million budget for other exploration, and also we're drilling with Newcrest money, or we're about to drill with Newcrest money on Ernan and our other islands. I just want to point out briefly that we've got 60 kilometres of ground there on the left-hand side in the Leonora area, from Gwalior all the way up through all that mineralised churned. That hasn't really been turned over. We didn't have the money to do it, neither did our predecessors, so we've held on to it and we're going to have a good look at it. We've got Pingeon, which is 150 k's northwest of Kalgoorlie. That's north of Breaker Resources, south of Carasoo Dam, so it's a good postcode area that we're looking at there. And there you can see on the right-hand side there, Tabar Island Group, so we're mining Simberi under the oxide, which we've got about 2 years left, is 1.4 million ounces of sulphide at 3.5 grams a tonne. We have provided samples to Newcrest, who are just 70 k's away with Lahire with their autoclave, and also in the next door island of Tatau, 5 kilometres away, Newcrest are doing an earn-in looking for copper-gold porphyries. So we're keeping our options open in PNG. When we think about our growth pipeline, our organic opportunities, whether it's the sulphides in Simberi going deeper in Gwalior or this exploration ground we've got, are quite affordable, and our cash generation is going to allow us to do that. But we think we need to diversify our production profile, as Gwalior, we're too reliant on it. So we are looking inorganically in Australia and overseas to be able to find producing assets that will diversify us. Just before I go to the conclusion, I also mention that as a Western Australian miner, we've found recently that the new government in the state has proposed a 50% hike to the royalty. Now, we've got a very good margin in WA, but the impact on the industry is the real issue. It will impact jobs and will do an extraordinary amount of damage to the gold industry for the benefit they'll get in budget repair. And the fact that 60% of the money they get out of that royalty, that damaging royalty increase, will go over to other states in the GST redistribution. It's a disproportionate damage for the benefit it'll make. So I think we're joining as a gold industry in the West to fight that issue. But finally, I'll just go back one. That's a picture of me getting an award. You don't want to hear about that. And a picture of Ian from Gold Road, who also got an award, and the chairman, who we share. We've had a great record year. We've been able to pay a dividend. We've been award-winning in gender diversity as well as Digger of the Year. We've been able to increase our resources and reserves. We can afford and progress our organic opportunities, but we're debt-free and positioned to grow, and some of that probably needs to be inorganic. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Bob. We have a little bit of time for questions, if there's any questions there. I might throw a couple at you, Bob. Maybe can you just tell us a little bit about a shaft option at Gwalior Deeps? I know that something's been mooted in the past. Maybe just a little bit about the economic decision making. Yeah, well, we did look at a shaft option, but two things. You need your ore body tenor, which we're currently mining about 7,000 ounces of vertical metre just on the two lodes that we mine. That would really need to continue at that strength all the way through, and under 1,800 metres below surface it has thinned out a bit. But also with a 1 million ounce high grade, 1 million tonnes that you're hoisting high grade, you're not utilising the skip much. So it's a bit of overkill. When we get the deep holes down, if we find it really strengthens, we could always look at that again, or slipe out a vent pass or something along those lines. So, or one of the vent shafts. But at the moment, it made sense. We're only using 9 trucks now. Add a few trucks, add some ventilation, and keep trucking. Sure. And secondly, at Gwalior Deeps as well, maybe just a few comments on potential geotechnical constraints at depth. I mean, if the ore body keeps going, at what point do you think it becomes impossible to carry on? Well, our rocks are quite forgiving in that shear package that we're in. I sort of take note of any seismic event above 1, and all the ones we've had have been below 2, which is sort of just background noise in Kalgoorlie. So we haven't had too much problem seismically. We mine from the inside out as a chevron down the mine. That helps us control the ground conditions. We haven't had rock bursts or anything like that. We do have, any of those minor bumps can knock off some fibrecrete, but we've upgraded the decline all the way down recently. We believe that the 2,200 metre level where we've got holes down to is geotechnically, all our models show that we can handle that and beyond. So it does probably mean that you're going to be putting in different types and more ground support, especially on the northern side of the ore body. Sure. Yeah. Okay, if we could thank Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.